Hello and welcome back to my channel, Checks, Captures, Threats, and today's video is going to be a little bit different. So, normally I'd have a playlist on what we'd be doing, but this is just an extra video, and it's actually going to be my story on how I've had 10 plus years of playing chess, and hopefully you can understand that when you're going through, if you're just starting off, if you're going through the same sort of time period as me, you can see how far you might have got, and also how far you can get. So in the background, I'm just going to have some of my games from the Rapid Increase playing while I talk through it. So, where do we start? I started learning chess when I was 6 years old. So, about 10 plus years now I've had through playing chess. So, obviously you can do the maths there of how old I am now. But as you can see, I started at quite a young age. Now, my dad taught me, and it was just a bit before my birthday. And I immediately fell in love with the game. I was immediately creating puzzles for myself. I was immediately, willing to play games and everything. Now, luckily, because I had the support, I was able to, wanted to learn extra. I always thought this could be a fun hobby at the time. I didn't know where else it could come to. So, what happened then is we started going to a club. Now, this club had not too many people, probably about 5 people, maybe 5 to just below 10, and all we would do there is learn a little bit of the game and also just play loads of games against other people. And this was me really starting out now, just to get the core basics. And because obviously I didn't really look at YouTube too much then. I wasn't really in that whole circuit of it all, so I was obviously at a club. Now this club taught me a load, and it's what got me into tournaments. So just before we go over the tournament side of things, what I would learn over these club games and everything that I'd be playing is just simple stuff like, how I started to create an opening for myself, actually understanding, core principles of the game, and all really of the fundamentals as we have gone through in the chess guide. All of that sort of stuff I was really learning in the club. So it got to a point where I wanted to play games against actual people, and I didn't really know where to play. So I decided that I would like to play over the board tournaments. And this is where my family and that found that we could do this thing called KGCA, which is called the Kent Junior Chess Association. So there was 3 brackets where you'd be either the under 9s, under 12s, or under 18s, I believe. And I obviously were being about 6 or so, and I obviously would be in the under 9s just to start off. And this is where I really grew to starting to feel the competition of it all. So I started out playing these tournaments, learning the full rules, touch move, hit the clock with the same hand and everything like that. And I found it really fun. I found it incredibly useful to learn through that, play against other people my age, and it soon got me to every week I was playing tournaments. Now the thing here is I thought of it as a hobby when I was younger. I didn't really think that it was going to be, take off as much. But I had football as well. I was obviously at a football club, so I was really prioritising that more than the chess. So some weekends I'd play a football match. Some other weekends I might do a chess tournament. But do I regret, doing the football over the chess? Probably. But at the same time, I didn't know where it was gonna take me off. So then I kept playing games. I wasn't really doing too well at the start, obviously, because you had some youngsters. Obviously, if you think nowadays that you can have youngsters at 8 years old that are, turning out to be candidate masters and that nowadays. So obviously, there was a few youngsters that are obviously miles better than me, but it was always fun to have that challenge. And over time, for the next 2 years, I was just playing these KGCA tournaments. Now, during these 2 years, I actually had changed clubs as well. I also had the first club I was always going through every week. It would go there. Then I went to this other one. Now, this other one would have started about 7 to 8 o'clock at night, and we'd really be playing tournaments sort of games. So I'd be playing against people much older than me, but it was really, again, for that classical sort of understanding, because I was always known for, if you play at the Kent Junior Chess Association, they're about 10-minute games, 15-minute games. These were about 1.5 hours each. So I would start at about 7 and actually get back to my house at about 11 o'clock at night. And obviously, being 7 years old, you could see it was quite a dedication to actually playing, these sort of games. And again, I feel like those two clubs really took off my experience of playing chess. I felt like that I really wouldn't have been able to be in a scenario like this right now if I was, in this playing these sort of clubs. So it got to that. Now during these club games as well, and I was still obviously doing this Kent Junior Chess Association tournaments, this is where I finally won my first tournament. And I was always getting, maybe third places before then, weeks before that. But the one I won was actually one of the hardest ones in close to London, where you have all of the kind of higher up chess players. But I was finally able to win, and that kind of took, my career to a bit more of a high level than what I first thought. I was like, okay, this is a fun hobby, but now I'm thinking that I can actually do stuff from this. So the big thing here is when I was about 7 or 8, we was approached by someone to actually play for the actual Kent team. So what this was is that you'd have about 4 places, so it'd be like Kent, Sussex, Essex, all of those sort of places, Richmond. It would be that sort of tournament between those, and each team would have about 20 players. Now the first 15 would count towards actually the tournament, whereas the last 5 would be just fun sort of games because they don't really count, because it might just be the reserves for it all. So I was approached by to play for them, which I obviously would have agreed. And this was obviously, these are going to Birmingham, going to Hull, all of these sort of places we had to be playing. I was also playing at the same time the chess championships, the British Chess Championship as well, which one of them will be a bit later on, which I'll go over. But at the minute here, the Kent under-9 team, I was obviously still at that age, and I played for that for about 3 years, and we won every year. And I, at the start, was on the reserve boards, but then slowly made my way up to about the 10th or so board. And on the same team, it actually was the youngest English GM at the minute. So, hopefully, you might know that is Shreyas Rayal. So, hopefully, that really, again, added to my sort of experience. And I was really starting to get the aspect of how competitive chess when I was older could actually be. So then it got to, after playing those 3 years there, I also was able to, some of them at the top boards had to do another tournament, which actually put me up all the way to board 6. So one of the top boards for Kent in a tournament, and again was able to win. And out of my record, I think I played 12 games for them and I only lost 1. So it's a very good sort of tournaments I had there. And then I started playing in what's called the British Chess Championship. So kind of like I had under 9s, under 12s, under 18s in the Kent Junior Chess Association, you also had here, the grading was a bit different to now, where you now have 1,000 ELO, 1,500. They actually did 3 digits, so I think it was under 100s, which would now be probably under 1,200, I would think. So I wasn't too, up just yet at that time, but I think I was having years, months off now and then, because obviously the football and obviously school. So I was able to do that, and then I was able to play in this British Chess Championship in Torquay, which is quite far away from where I live. So that was actually a week I had to spend camping to also do that. But I was able to get joint second and another tournament where I progressed really well. So that was about my first 4 years of playing chess. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit maybe different. So I'm now about, let's say I was about 10, and I also, when I won that Dulwich chess tournament, I started going straight into the under 18s. I really made that jump from that under 12s or under 11s, or what it was, to under 18s, because I felt like it was kind of, I was going to get the better games when I was at the under 18s, and I was able to, keep learning. So this is where it takes a bit of a turn, that when I was about 10 to 11, just starting to get into secondary school. Before that, there was obviously many tournaments I was able to play in. I was able to play in different tournaments where I was able to play stuff called the Mega Final and the Giga Final and all of that. And ultimately, I was starting to build up a good repertoire for getting, a higher up grade over the board and that. But then came secondary school and obviously COVID. Now, COVID obviously halted everything over the board, but as you know, chess had skyrocketed during COVID. So obviously, I was able to, carry that on. But just starting secondary school, obviously, it's quite a big commitment. So I had to, I had to kind of stop the chess for a little bit. So I even gave it a year off pretty much. And I was still doing football then. And that shortly went after about a year or two. I started quitting that and was able to then later on, probably 2 years into my secondary school, started really properly going back to chess, because I'd always watch on YouTube all of those sort of like those chess championships they were doing with Magnus Hikaru, and you had some of like the chess masters and all that. So I was always watching that, but I really struggled to try and find any games, and obviously online was really the only way I could probably play. So obviously now this is where I started playing Blitz really, and I also didn't play Rapid too much. That's why now, as you see, I've really started this rapid increase, because I played, before this whole series, I probably played about 3 games of Rapid on this account. I started all the way in 2017, which I was about 8 when I started this account, and since then I've been trying to play as much as I can on here. But the main thing there was that after a few years of secondary school, I was able to, start properly playing chess, and this is where I kind of changed how I was learning. I thought now, how I was playing a little bit better than, I would say, average here, that I was able to, get a sort of aspect of maybe playing higher up than I thought. So I was thinking it was a hobby. Now I'm thinking it's quite a competitive reasoning. So what happened here is I spent probably before I was spending about 2 to 3 hours maybe a day on chess, maybe an hour some days, and maybe even none at all before then, because obviously it's a hobby. I wasn't really thinking too much of it. But especially now, and probably the past 3, 4, 5 years even now, I've been spending a good, probably before just starting secondary school, obviously I didn't really do too much, but then after that is about 4 to 5 hours a day, and now I'm spending a good 6, 7, 8 hours now purely on chess, because I want to try and get as high as I can. And as you can see here, I'm doing YouTube videos on it. I'm trying to teach you lot how to, try and become as good as you can, and, trying to get as high as you possibly can get. So obviously it took a bit of time between, I believe, 2020 and 2022, obviously with the whole COVID going on. But then 2023, I finally made my return to Over the Board. So it's my first tournament and my last tournament, I would say now. I haven't actually been over the board for the last 2 years, just because obviously with COVID, and I just really haven't had not too many tournaments around where I live. So I'm trying to find as many as I can in the hopefully coming future. So we have that. But the tournament I did, the most recent one I've done in 2023, really late going into 2024, it was a normal, like, imagine like the Kent Junior Chess Association. So it was like a 15-minute 10, and there's about 5 rounds of that, and I was able to win it. Actually, it was in the under 1500s or something. So because I didn't have a grade, I only obviously had online, and because I hadn't played for 5-ish years, they completely got rid of my grade, as obviously I think most people who couldn't play over the board wouldn't have had that. And I was able to get quite a nice win from all of that, and I was able to get a nice bit of prize. So also during this time, I'd also played something called the Thanet Congress. Now what this was also another 5 or 6 rounds. This was classical again. So what this was like a this was, imagine like a classical tournament you see on YouTube, maybe with all the Magnus and that. It was kind of like that, how it felt, with the whole, how long it was. It's about 3-4 hours a game. And again, I wouldn't do too well, as this had, I was not in the open or the intermediates, I think, but there was still a really high amount of players at a very high level, and especially in that open, you had a few people with titles, and it kind of, you saw there was still quite the high level to this. So hopefully as well in the coming few years, what I'm trying to hopefully do is do an over the board sort of playlist, what I can do for YouTube, and try and get a title. That's my aim in the future, I think. But now I feel like what my aim is here, and that's pretty much my story then, and I'll go over it one more time just before I finish this video. But I think the main thing I want to say here is now I am spending, a third of my day, 24 hours, I'm spending it probably a third to 8 hours of just purely trying to learn chess. I mean, especially now I'm, doing all the Gambit stuff, I'm doing YouTube, and I'm trying to get, my Blitz and my bullet on chess.com is still about 2000. I obviously don't know how Rapid will be going yet, because obviously I'm doing it now, and I was always a bit worse on Rapid than probably I am Blitz, because I'm obviously younger. I was able to think a lot quicker, so I was able to do that. And obviously now I also play on Lichess, and that's why I'm getting, also as high as I can on that. But it just shows how, you can have a long, 10 years, but you see how I had some breaks in between. So if you're just starting out, hopefully you can have the sort of, career I've had so far, and hopefully in the next, 10 years I can try and redo this video and see what the difference is. But hopefully, even if you've played about the same amount of time as me, maybe you started when you were 7 years old, and you're now maybe even just 13 or 14, that's still a good 6 years of learning the game. So hopefully you could have some sort of the same aspects that I had. So hopefully you can get, that sort of career you want in chess. Again, if you just like it as a hobby, hopefully you've still spent, maybe even if you spent 5 years on the hobby and you don't do too much, maybe no over the board tournaments and just online, that's still quite a commitment. You've got to think how much time you're putting into it still. So hopefully you've enjoyed this story so far. Now let me just recap so I clear it all up in case you're lost in anywhere. So I started off when I was 6, and I really started clubs at the first part just to try and learn chess. I then played all sorts of tournaments: Thanet Congress, KGCA, the Kent Junior Chess Association, which was all these, most of the time it was all Blitz sort of rapid games really, and then some classical games, as in my second club as well, which I was able to play most of those, winning a few tournaments there as well. And overall, just enjoying it as well. That's the main thing. Chess can be frustrating, obviously, in many cases. It's always never going to go so well, but at the same time, it's always not going to go the worst. So, obviously, over time, I was able to do that. And now, then it got into where I was able to play for Kent, which is a very big achievement for me. When I was younger, I was very proud of that, and I was able to, really feel like I actually had a place for chess for a future. And as we see now, it's kind of helped, as you can see with my YouTube, as I'm slowly starting to try and get that going. And hopefully you've watching this and you can try and get, at least if I can get a comment, if you're saying like, how well you've been trying to do for chess, even if you've played for 2 years, a year even, and just see your progress, and I'll try and, look at your comment and see if I can reply to it. So, and then after that now, obviously, there's a bit of a blimp, I would say, in that whole secondary school changeover with COVID. It's always going to be a big impact on, what I was able to do. So hopefully, you might have had the same thing as well. I'm trying to just say here how we might have gone through the same sort of ideas. And if you haven't, you might go through this at a later stage, and you can always come back to this video and see maybe what you can do as well. So that is going to be it for today's video. It's obviously just a one-off little thing. This won't be attached to any playlists or anything. This is just a video on my whole 10 plus years of learning the game and what I've accomplished so far. And hopefully in maybe another 5 years I might try and do this again, what I've done in the last 5 years, maybe in the next 10 years. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. So thank you, and bye bye.